I'd love you if you were the color of a baboon's ass.
Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
And I'm Iron Balls Michael.
That's maybe like one of my favorite names in the whole movie.
Yeah, that's priceless.
Yeah, it was so great. I was reading the characters. We are way off topic already, but I was reading the characters and the actors on IMDb, and I was like, an Iron Balls McGinty. And I was sitting there, like, completely ironically, like, I'm trying to think of where Iron Balls McGinty is. And then I went, wait, his name is Iron Balls McGinty. I remember Iron Balls.
I mean, this movie throws so much stuff at you that by that point in the movie, you almost kind of don't even blink.
Yeah. And before we talk about the movie that we're doing this week, I just wanted to say a special thanks to everyone. Thank you all for the great movie recommendations. This is the Viewer's Choice episode, our first ever. There's a lot of great stuff here, and we've added a ton of great movies to our watch list. And to be honest, I expect that several of these films that we didn't pick on this episode will be picked in the next year for episodes. Specifically, The Green Mile was one we kind of talked about back and forth that almost made the cut.
I think that would have been my first choice behind this.
And The Green Mile is something that we've had on our list, I think, since day one of the podcast, and it's been bounced across each other in a few episodes, but we haven't quite got there on that one yet. But in the next year, we will do The Green Mile. The other one that I wanted to shout out as well was The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. The person who recommended that one, I watched the trailer for it, and I was like, this is literally my taste in movies. I cannot wait to watch this movie.
I've never heard of that movie or seen the trailer, but I'm conjuring, the title alone is conjuring a lot of vivid images in my mind.
So the title is The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, which is a 1984 sci-fi. The trailer looks hilarious and surreal, and I'm so invested just by the trailer.
I'm picturing some like Flash Gordon stuff.
Oh
right
yeah.
now.
I can't wait. I cannot wait to watch it. So we will do that on the podcast, I promise you, in the next year. The last one that I was going to mention was Cape Fear.
Oh, Robert De Niro.
Yes,
yeah.
And more importantly, Martin Scorsese,
Ooh.
who is coming out with a movie in the next year called Killers of the Flower Moon, which I am very excited to check out.
Huh.
Yeah, it's based on a true story, and I think that we might have to do a Martin Scorsese 2-part special in the next year to celebrate that movie coming out.
Have you ever seen The Irishman?
I have not yet.
His big Netflix epic?
I've kind of been waiting for the right time to watch that. There are movies that, and this might be weird, but there are movies that I don't watch until I'm in like A, the perfect mood to watch them in, or B, I almost like I save them. Like I tuck them away and I'm like, I'm going to pull
like
this out.
Like it's for your rainy day.
Yeah.
Like you're storing cash in like couch cushions or something.
Yeah, like even my favorite directors like John Carpenter, I haven't watched all of his movies yet, or Stanley Kubrick, because I just want some gems to be left, you know? Like, if I die and have one movie left on each of their watch lists, I would be probably okay with that.
We can play those movies at your funeral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's perfect. You nailed it.
Okay.
But we're not talking about my funeral today. We're talking about The Jerk from 1979.
Woo!
This is one of Steve Martin's... it's his first starring role.
That's right.
And this movie really is his movie. And it captures so much of his humor and is really a culmination of his humor up to that point in time.
Yeah.
It's obviously a comedy, and I'm going to pass it over you to Mike to talk about the plot, or what plot is there.
What such that there is. Okay.
Such that there is.
Right. So Steve Martin stars as Navin R. Johnson, who is living with a black family in Mississippi, and on his 18th birthday, they break the news to him that he, Steve Martin, is not actually their natural-born son.
He was left at their doorstep.
Right.
And he thinks that he's black this whole time.
Yeah, and this news really throws him for a loop. So after hearing some music on the radio, he decides to leave the farm and go make a name for himself in the big city. And things really just dovetail in a lot of different directions from there. This movie almost is like a series of vignettes. Like there is almost no real plot.
I would describe this movie as the plot is used as a device to ensure comedy and hijinks ensue. And it just basically, the plot is just there enough so that we can get from one comedic situation to another.
Yeah, like there's a scene where this isn't really spoilers, but like there's a scene where some guy is shooting at him for basically no reason. And
he's just targeted him for an assassination.
Right. So he's working at a gas station. This lunatic starts shooting at him. He runs away, runs into like a carnival, hides in a carnival booth, and then just the next scene is him just working at a carnival. So like and it's just like, all right, like
now he works at a carnival.
Yeah. So and it kind of really speaks to the character of Naven that Steve Martin portrays. Like he really is he really is kind of this lovable idiot.
Yes.
Like he's this very innocent, very hey Indy.
Indy, is that your best friend?
We're recording a podcast. So Naven, Steve Martin, is just this really lovable, innocent bumpkin who just kind of flits from one position in life to the next. Like he's very happy-go-lucky, very like innocent. Really is
simple-minded.
The operative word. There's a scene early on where so he's been living at this gas station that he's also been working at, and the delivery man delivers the new phone book, and he's so happy to find his name in the phone book. He's like, my name's in print. I'm somebody now. Yeah. He's like, things are going to start happening for me now. And then almost immediately he's the target of an assassination attempt.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah.
It's a true rags to riches to rags story.
Yes.
And I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in who this movie is for. I almost immediately thought of Forrest Gump when we started this movie.
Yeah, kind of, without really the historical backdrop. But yeah definitely.
You can draw a lot of comparisons between the two, and Forrest Gump has such a widespread appeal as like one of those classics of all time, with maybe some butts involved in it because of its importance in movie cinema, similar to like Titanic maybe.
Can I make a confession?
Yeah.
I've never actually seen Forrest Gump.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
However, I will say I have seen, until I was probably about 23, I'd never seen Forrest Gump from start to finish. I'd seen the entire movie, but in clips of like 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there, not in any particular order. Like it's just a movie that growing up was always playing on TV, and I never caught the beginning of it.
I think you're right. And even just, man, maybe I'm feeling wistful because I just turned 30, but like even just the idea of like movies being on TV.
Yeah.
Like you could just turn the TV on and catch a movie halfway through.
Yeah.
Like you damn kids listening to this don't understand what an event this was.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And this movie is somewhere in the same kind of magical vein as Forrest Gump. And let's wait to compare that a little bit later.
You know what? Magical is kind of actually an apt word for it, because I mean this movie is a comedy, but it's not really a mean-spirited comedy.
No.
It's actually the ending in particular, I was kind of like, this is kind of nice. Like this is a relatively happy ending considering.
Yeah, it ties out pretty well actually.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that in the spoilers section.
Even I'm just thinking about this now. So at the start of the movie, it's his 18th birthday, and Steve Martin runs to his room and starts crying because he feels different. This is before they break the news to him that he's not their natural born child. And his brother's trying to comfort him, so he walks in the room. He's like, "Hey, Naven, I wrapped your sandwich in cellophane just like you want." It's weirdly just like, cool, thanks.
This whole episode is totally just gonna devolve into me and you laughing at all of the jokes.
Okay, well,
together.
you know what? Okay, I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid off right now.
Yeah.
When you recommended this movie, when you told me to watch this movie, I was like, sure, whatever. And I watched it this afternoon on my laptop. Honestly, I had a really good time with this movie. To be honest, this is probably the best viewing experience I've had since joining this podcast.
Wow.
Really?
I love it. I love to hear you say that. And,
Yeah.
and on the Viewer's Choice episode as well.
That's right.
Cool.
So thanks, viewers. You made a good choice.
For sharing a really special comedy with us. Yeah.
Just a little about me. Like, I really like comedies, but I don't often laugh when I'm watching them by myself. Because I'm kind of like, I'm analyzing them a little bit, right?
Okay, yeah.
So, like, you know, like I'll watch like a comedy and a joke will play and I'll be like, yes, that was very clever. Good job.
You break it down in your head?
Kinda. It's like I'm analyzing math, sort
Yeah.
of. But like, I was like howling in my room today. Like, there are some moments in this movie that just I could not. I think a lot of humor is surprise, right?
Right.
It's stuff that comes at you from left field. Despite how absurd this movie is, it kept surprising me.
Yes.
Like, it kept just jumping ahead a little bit. There's a moment later on in the movie where he goes to cash a check for $250,000, and he goes to cash it thinking it's only 250 big ones, or
Right.
250 donuts, as he calls it.
Yeah.
And then the guy tells him it's $250,000. And when he finds out, his head swivels around like Reagan in The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I think if I'd been drinking milk, I would have squirted it out my nose. Like, it caught me so off guard.
There are definitely some moments that cut you off guard. And that's where you were talking about earlier, how we were talking about earlier, how like the plot is just so bare bones that it really is just taking us from like one comedy bit to another. And so you can't expect anything because there's not enough plot there for you to expect what's going to happen next. It's not formulaic, really.
No, like, there's moments that are just like, again, there's that moment I was talking about where Navin gets his name in the phone book and he's excited because he thinks, oh, now things are going to start happening to me. Hard cut to this homicidal maniac randomly picking names out of the phone book, just being like, oh, this guy seems like a bastard. And then he goes to try to assassinate him.
Yeah.
Like, I've been a writer.
He hates the cans!
Yeah, he hates the cans. Hey, these cans are defective. You know what? I've been a writer for 15 years, and I'm pretty good at what I do. I could never have come up with that.
Oh my
like, in a
God.
million years, I could never have come up with that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's try to stay a little bit focused right
Okay.
now. Let's talk characters and people you may know. So we've been talking about Nathan R. Johnson here. Steve Martin, extraordinary actor, comedian, musician, and writer. He's got it all. And this is his first starring role. He wrote this movie. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the backstory of writing it a little bit later. How old do you think he was in this movie?
His character is 18, but he's definitely not 18.
No.
Steve Martin also is just one of those guys who, like, he's looked the same for 50 years.
He's looked 40 his entire life.
Yeah, like, even now at, like, what, 80, he still looks 40.
Yeah.
So good for him. But,
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to say, like, they're maybe, like, mid-30s.
Okay, so Jess guessed 46, and I was like, nah, you're wrong.
No.
He's 38. And,
Okay.
And no, I guessed he's 38. He's actually 35, so you were actually the closest
Okay,
to. Winner,
yeah.
winner, chicken dinner.
Woo.
What
What do I win?
Nothing at all.
Oh.
More presence on this podcast. You get to talk more.
Okay.
Now, Steve Martin is obviously a important comedian of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So maybe some younger audiences where you might have seen him in the last 2 years. He recently, him and Martin Short did a Netflix special together called An Evening You Will Forget for the Rest of Your Life, which I found very endearing. I absolutely loved it.
Okay.
They also he's also a part of the show Only Murders in the Building with himself, again, Martin Short and Selena Gomez.
I remember seeing him promoting that. That only came out like last year, didn't it?
Yeah, and I would recommend it. Honestly, it's a pretty good, it's a murder mystery whodunit with Martin Short and Steve Martin's comedy
and
being brought to
fucking Selena Gomez,
yeah.
too. Okay.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really great cast. They all like really gel together. I can't recommend it enough.
Okay. I will say, for people our age or a bit younger, your earliest point of comparison might have been the 2006 Pink Panther remake.
Yes.
With Beyonce. He played Jack Cousteau.
Yeah, the Pink Panther.
Honestly, like, watching this movie gave me a lot of respect for him as an actor.
Yeah.
Like, he's fantastic in this movie.
He is fantastic in this movie. And the other movies that you might know him from as well in that same time period, or maybe just before that in the 90s, that I grew up with more of, was the Father of the Bride series and Cheaper by the Dozen.
Okay, I'm not familiar.
Okay, fair enough. But the other movie that he's also really well known for that took place in the 80s alongside John Candy was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Right.
Another classic that Jess and I rewatched this year. And it's actually, funny enough, this is a very timely episode. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles just got re-released last week with 75 minutes of additional footage.
Nice.
So you can go and find that, check that out, and get a little bit more of that classic. I want to ask you, actually, while we're on the topic of Steve Martin, what is your relationship to Steve Martin?
You know, I know that he was apparently a hugely successful comedian in the 80s, but then at the top of his game, he just retired. And I watched some of his old stand-up a while ago. And, like, it's actually, like, if the intent of this movie was to translate his stand-up style into cinema, they did a really good job. Because what little I've seen of his stand-up is very much, like, energetic and wacky and zany, just like this movie.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of, you know, my relationship with Steve Martin, like, I don't really... A lot of his stuff was kind of... I feel like a lot of his most influential stuff was kind of before my time.
Yeah.
But I've always... Whenever... It's one of those things, though, where whenever I have watched a Steve Martin movie, I've always been like, wow, this guy's really good.
Yeah, and it's really funny because I think Steve Martin is, like, a very quintessential actor for our podcast because he's somebody who's just before our time, who, if you're not into old movies, you might not have gotten to ever really experience him, but he is somebody who's special that is worth checking out, because you and I had an absolute riot with this one, and so did Jason as well, and I'm gonna talk about Jason's review a bit later.
Who the hell is Jason?
My relationship with Steve Martin's maybe a little bit different from you, because I had seen all of those movies growing up. However, like, I don't know if I really appreciated Steve Martin until maybe about the last 5 years, and I've slowly been rewatching all of his stuff over the last 5 years and becoming more and more a fan. And like I said, it's kind of culminated with him releasing Only Murders in the Building, which I've really been enjoying. So let's move on and talk a couple of the other actors. There's one actor that I really want to highlight. Mary Kimball Johnson is the other character in this movie that kind of becomes Naven's love interest of the film. So she's played by Bernadette Peters, who you might not actually know as a large, important movie actress, but she is incredibly important in theater and won a large number of Tonys for appearing in a number of different plays over the years, especially in, like, anywhere from, honestly, like, the 70s right up into the 2018s, she was on Broadway.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Good for her.
And so the other movies that you might have actually seen her in are the musical drama Pennies from Heaven, which also happens to star Steve Martin alongside her.
Oh, wow. They really are perfect for each other.
Exactly. And she stars in the movie Annie as well, like the orphan Annie.
Oh, never seen it.
There are a couple of other, like, smaller appearances that I want to name and just shout out. So Lenny Montana, who's one of the con men who shows up later in the film and tries to con Naven out of money, is played by Luca Brasi. Is played by Lenny Montana.
Is he part of Iron Balls McGinty's entourage?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that is Luca Brasi from The Godfather.
Oh.
Who actually was a real life
gangster?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the right word.
Con man,
no.
loan shark.
He was what's the word? Oh no, he was an enforcer.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he was an enforcer for the Gambino crime syndicate, I believe.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so
Damn.
he appears in the film. Carl Gottlieb, who was Iron Balls McGinty, actually co-wrote Jaws. Fun fact. And he was really good friends with Steve Martin.
What?
Yeah. And
that's the funniest thing I've heard all day.
So he actually helped write the screenplay with Steve Martin because even though he had actually very recently to this movie become extraordinarily famous for co-writing Jaws, he was still very good friends with Steve Martin beforehand, so he got involved with the movie that way.
He just kind of did it. That's really cool.
Yeah. Harry Hartunian, the gas station owner, is actually the very famous stand-up comedian Jackie Mason, who...
Yeah,
I hadn't heard his name before because he's another one of those characters who's kind of before our time. But you may know him from the rabbi in The Simpsons.
Really? Krusty's dad?
Yep.
Oh man, that's so... Because like he was talking to... Whenever he's talking on screen, it's one of those things where I'm like, I definitely know this voice from somewhere.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And that's where you specifically would know that voice from.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple other people that I want to highlight. M. Ebbett Walsh is the assassin in the movie, which is a very comical scene. He plays Captain Bryant, the police chief in Blade Runner. He's also...
Oh my god, he does!
Yep.
You're correct.
He's also Earl Stutz, the sailor who first sees the Iron Giant in The Iron Giant. He's actually a very prolific actor who just kind of is a character actor who just appears briefly in films. But Roger Ebert once said that any movie that has Emmett Walsh in it, by like absolute bare minimum, can't be a bad movie.
That's probably the highest praise Roger Ebert has ever given anyone.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Like the scene where whenever he's on screen, that's another one of those things where like whenever he was on screen, I'd be looking at him like, I've definitely seen this guy from somewhere.
You have. He was actually most recently in the original Knives Out movie. He was Mr. Prufrock, the security guard, which is a fantastic movie. One of my favorites of the 2010s.
Huh.
The last person I'm going to mention is Caitlin Adams, who plays the punk biker girlfriend in the movie.
The woman who receives his special purpose.
So she's actually less known for her acting, but more known for her acting coaching. So she's coached the Oscar-winning actors Jane Fonda, Nicole Kidman, Amy Adams, Brad Pitt, like the list goes on and on and on and on.
So she's kind of proof that old adage, those who can't do teach, is not true.
Yeah.
Because she's also really good at this movie.
Yeah, I don't really have any complaints about her. So that's a lot of the characters and people you may know, or just cool pieces of movie history knowledge for you. The director of the film is Carl Reiner. If that name sounds familiar, it's Rob Reiner's dad, who is a massively important comedian of the era even before this, really in the 60s, 70s, who frequently collaborated around that time with Mel Brooks. So I actually really felt the Mel Brooks influence a bit in this movie.
I was gonna say, now that you've mentioned that, I could very easily see Mel Brooks' DNA in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. And he actually ended up going on to do some other movies with Steve Martin, which we'll talk about later. They actually eventually formed a really good relationship.
One thing I thought was really clever was Carl Reiner actually appears as himself in this movie.
Yes.
That was really funny.
And actually his son, Rob Reiner, the very famous director who I maybe am closer to at this point in time, who did like the movie Stand By Me.
He also did The Princess Bride,
and he did The Princess Bride. Yes, you are correct. He had like a crazy run of like 5 years where he had like just banger after banger after banger.
Wow.
But he actually has a small role in the film as well. He plays the guy in the truck who picks up Navin, the first hitchhike.
Thank you for the company. God darn it.
But modern audiences, even though I was saying Carl Reiner is more an actor and director of the 60s and 70s, you might know him from the modern movies, the Ocean's 11 series. He plays the old con man Saul Bloom.
Okay.
If you've seen those movies and you love those movies, you know who I'm talking about.
Okay.
So, those are kind of the important people. Let's talk who this movie is for. And I want to ask you a question first to open this
Go
up.
on.
Do you think this movie holds up to a modern watch?
Yes. There are some old movies that you watch and you kind of have to enjoy them with the knowledge that, you have to like kind of appreciate where this movie was in its time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I wasn't expecting much for this movie. I had a great fucking time.
Yeah,
I had
so
a
did
really good time.
And I agree with you. I think this does hold up as a pretty timeless comedy, to be honest. It fits really well as like a great 70s comedy, but I genuinely think that this is a good watch in 2022. And
I also, not to cut you off, I don't know if I should go there, but like, we're living obviously in very different times.
Yep.
And like, this movie has a couple moments that are like, ugh, but like, it isn't like, it's not a hugely offensive movie considering where we are now.
So, for a movie about Steve Martin, who thinks that he's a black child for most of his life and realizing this, it's not a mean-spirited movie in any way. And I think I just kind of want to leave it at that at this point in time and save this more for the spoiler discussion.
Sure.
And I think that's where you and I leave it, and that I don't think this is a mean-spirited movie. There's obviously a couple parts that maybe feel like they couldn't be done in today's climate.
I read that in 2015, somebody asked Steve Martin if this movie could still be enjoyed now by modern audiences. And he said something to the effect of like everyone was treated with incredible respect on the set of this movie.
Yeah.
So,
and this is a movie that feels like everybody was having a blast making it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really pours out onto the screen. So I think those are like, it has widespread appeal. It's really enjoyable. I think where the movie actually, maybe this is a negative just to its cultural impact and why it doesn't have as much of a cultural impact as some of maybe Steve Martin's other movies, is this is definitely not a kid's movie or really even like a family movie. Like, it would have been almost like awkward having been shown this as a kid by your parents.
What do you mean? Just about Steve Martin discovering his special purpose.
And so I think that is why this movie doesn't have the same staying power, but it's a movie that when you discover it as an adult, it kind of becomes special. It's one of those like movies that you find as an adult and you're like, God damn, that's a really funny movie. I really enjoyed that. And you might end up talking about it like you and I are now.
It's funny though, just thinking about it now, if there were a few moments that were just cut out or maybe toned down, this would work as a family movie.
Yeah.
Because this movie is almost a cartoon.
Yeah.
Like, there are some really absurd things that happen that are just so... I'm thinking in particular of, like, once he strikes it rich and, like, you see all the extravagant things he does with his wealth.
Yeah.
Like, this movie is almost a cartoon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I very much agree. It plays very much like a Mel Brooks movie, and I think it's a little bit more adult humor, and the adult humor is a little bit more blunt than a Mel Brooks movie is. Like, I think as a kid, you might miss some of the adult humor in a Mel Brooks movie, whereas in this, it's a lot more there.
To be fair, like, his dog is literally named Shithead for the whole
exactly.
movie.
That's pretty much and the kid who's wearing the bullshit shirt. Have you seen my kid? No, what is he wearing? He has a shirt that says bullshit. You're just like, what?
Yeah. And then like, I don't know, and then like, she gets the kid, she's like, oh, it would have been really embarrassing to come home without the kid.
I think that if you're a fan of Mel Brooks movies, I think you're really going to enjoy this one because, like we said, it's got a similar DNA to his films. Likewise, I almost want to say that Jim Carrey has definitely pulls some inspiration from Steve Martin's performances.
You know what? I didn't think about that, but that's a really good point.
That's the first person I thought about. The second person or group that I thought about is I think that there's a similar DNA to the movie Step Brothers here.
Okay.
In that it's a very light on plot, heavy on comedic scenes kind of movie, and the characters are the same kind of almost dim-witted kind of characters. However, Step Brothers plays as a little bit more of a mean-spirited version of this.
They both involve very innocent, blockheaded characters.
Yeah,
in over their head in worlds they don't really understand.
exactly.
And the world is just as insane as they are.
Exactly. And with how widespread appeal that movie had when it came out, I genuinely think that if you like Step Brothers, you're probably going to have some fun with this one as well.
Yeah, I could see that. You and I rewatched Step Brothers a few years ago, and I think it held up as well.
Oh, absolutely it
Yeah.
did. Yeah, I mean, Will Ferrell is one of my favorite comedians of all time. Like, classic Will Ferrell is almost cannot be beat.
Pretty much, yeah.
He's just such a naturally talented human being, as well as just like Steve Martin. And I would imagine that Will Ferrell shares some inspiration from Steve Martin as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. Honestly, I might go there. I might also say this movie is almost this movie might just be for everyone.
Yeah.
'Cause like it's not a dumb movie, but it's not terribly subtle or terribly sophisticated. Like, Steve Martin is very big gestures, like very big emotions, right?
Yeah.
Like, he really is kind of like John Candy or Chris Farley. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like I could have shown this movie to my parents, or
They've probably seen it, to be honest.
I feel like, hypothetically, if I had kids, I could show this movie to my parents and my kids separately, and they would both find it really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie is borderline timeless. And it's a real shame that it's less in the culture than it is now. Because it's funny how some movies just stay in the culture and some don't. And part of it's just because of TV syndication for like our generation and the generations just above us. Now it's just, I guess, whatever ends up streaming, really.
Just whatever the algorithm smiles upon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're still waiting for the algorithm to smile upon us.
Yeah, exactly.
Like and leave a comment.
Please smash that like button. When to watch. So I thought this was a really great Sunday night slot movie.
Okay.
I also think because the runtime, it's only a 95-minute movie. You could honestly really watch it any point in time during the week. It's really light subject matter. You don't have to think at all. It just plays out really well. It'll help get you through the week.
Yeah, I literally watched it this afternoon, and I had a really good time.
Yeah,
so
it's very light, and I think this is a movie. I had kind of a rough day at work. Maybe I turn this on to make myself happy.
I would say this is a movie best enjoyed with other people.
Yes. Yeah.
I think my one regret is that I didn't watch it with like my roommate or anyone else.
Yeah. We'll definitely rewatch it together at some point.
Yeah, I'll think about it. But
where to watch? It's not currently streaming anywhere, unfortunately, but you can rent it just about anywhere where you can rent movies.
I rented it on YouTube.
So did I.
Okay, there you go.
And I think that takes us to the end of our spoiler-free discussion of The Jerk. And honestly, like you and I both said, it's a really great original comedy that has pretty widespread appeal. So if you're at all interested in watching this, go check it out and come back and join us for the spoiler-free conversation. Or the spoiler-full conversation. Spoiler-full conversation.
Honestly, seriously, just go watch this movie. It's really fun.
It is really fun.
It's a good time.
Yeah. Okay, so we're into the spoiler-full section now. We'll start in front of the camera, talk some of our favorite moments, favorite lines, and then we'll move back into the making of the movie.
Okay.
So,
you and I were talking before we started recording that we didn't want this podcast to just devolve into you and me just shouting our favorite quotes at each other, but like there's a good chance that's gonna happen.
Yeah. Maybe we talk about, each of us share a couple of our favorite moments and our favorite quotes and scenes. I'll share what Jason's favorite moments and scenes are. And then we maybe hard cut ourselves off before it devolves into that.
Done.
So I would say I'm going to start with one of my first favorite scenes.
Go.
Is the assassination attempt at the gas station. When he starts yelling, he hates these kids! Stay away from the kids! That was, honestly, I think that was really the first time that I started uncontrollably laughing in this movie. Like, there were some times that I laughed out loud very hard during the movie in the opening scenes, but that one got me. That one genuinely got me.
Hey, you're not carnival personnel.
That's one of Jason's favorites. He's not carnival personnel.
Yeah.
So that's one of Jason's favorite lines. I'm glad you brought that one up.
I think the scene where he gets seduced, like he finds out his quote unquote special purpose.
Yeah.
That scene is really funny. And just like, even just from a writing standpoint, the fact that he's such a innocent, boyish 18-year-old quote unquote man, and then this like really sexually aggressive biker chick just horning in on him, like that whole scene was so freaking funny. And like they go to her trailer, he's just like, wow, like they say you can tell a lot about someone by the way they live. Like, you're a genuinely filthy person. Yeah. And then he says that, and then she puts like a little slap of deodorant on one arm.
Yeah.
Almost like to prove him wrong. Like,
so what I loved about that scene is actually the scene that follows is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie, is the letter that he writes to his grandmother about the special purpose. I legitimately laughed so hard I cried during that scene. I probably missed about half of what she said, and what got me the most at the end too was when his brother bursts out laughing because he's trying to hold in his laughter at all of this at the very end, because I believe in my heart of hearts that he genuinely broke character in that moment and started laughing at how awesome that letter was.
Jesus. So funny.
That is without a doubt one of the most comedic scenes of any movie I've ever seen, and it has to be the funniest letter I've ever heard read out on a movie.
I think one of the moments that got me the hardest was towards the end when, like, I think he lost all his money and he's decided he's going to go hunt down Bernadette. So he has a moment with Shithead where he's like doing the whole like, I gotta let you go, you'll find a good family, and the dog just runs off. He's like, hey, come back, I'm not done. The dog comes back and he's like, no, go on, get out of here, boy, like I never liked you anyway. And then the dog runs off, and then he's like, wait, never mind, I'll take you with me. And then the next scene is him dragging the dog behind him. And then there's a voiceover with his letter where he's like, Shithead is guiding the way. That was so funny.
Yeah.
And then at the end, when he's like collecting all this stuff, and he's like, all I need is my dog. And the dog growls at him. He's like, I don't need my dog anyway. Like,
I want to say that Jason's favorite scene is when him and Marie are lying in bed together and Marie's asleep. And Naven goes into his monologue about, I know we've only known each other for 4 weeks and 3 days, but it seems to me like 9 weeks and 5 days. And then he explains how he arrived.
He breaks down the math. As an accountant, that must have really tickled you.
I really appreciated it.
I love the start of that scene where he's like, God, you're so beautiful and peaceful, almost like you're dead.
And what's really great about that scene, and what Jason echoed as well in his review, is that he just keeps it going. Like, he somehow keeps the scene going with only explaining the math behind this, and it's all pure gold. All of it.
So, and then at the end, when he's like, so he's talking to her and she's asleep, and he's like, I want to marry you. Say nothing if you're okay with that. And it pause. He's like, "You made me very happy." Like it's so.
Oh
He
man.
sells that. You know what else? What other moment really sold me is when the homicidal maniac comes back and he's chasing him, and like he like very painfully climbs over a barbed wire fence, and then the guy comes up to him and just like opens the fence, like it just slides it open, and then it turns out he's not trying to kill him. He's actually turned his life around, and now he's a private detective. And then he lifts his hat, and his badge is on the inside of his hat. Like it's so stupid.
There's so many hilariously stupid moments like that are so genius. It's like observational humor. Like what if we moved the audience expectation from here and we altered it and put it here instead?
Yeah, it's like I was saying earlier. It literally is like a cartoon. Like there's also a scene where like some like 3 hooligans show up in a car, and he's just like, he's like, "Oh, I need a credit card because I'm here all by myself, blah, 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 blah." And then he's like, "You guys got a credit card in there?" And they start rummaging through all the purses they've stolen.
Yeah.
And they find one.
And he figures it all out that they're playing him, and he decides to play him back. That scene is quite hilarious because the conclusion of that scene, again, is one of those laugh out loud funny moments that I did not see coming in a movie.
No. And again, like I was saying earlier, this is a movie that like it just keeps throwing sucker punches at you.
Yeah.
Like you're just pummeled by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Even there's a scene at the end where like he's got these like shady characters trying to like give him business information, and then one of them says something racially insensitive, let's put it that way, and he just like flips out and starts beating the crap out of all of them.
Yeah, he goes Karate Kid on them. And
Yeah.
and that was the scene where I was like, up until that point, I was like, I wonder if Jim Carrey was inspired by this film. And that scene, I was like, Jim Carrey was absolutely inspired by this film.
Yeah, I know. And then that's the scene that ends with him kicking a guy in the balls, hurting his foot, and then hard cut to the next scene. He's having dinner with Bernadette. She's like, "How could you have known that was Iron Balls McKinty?"
And actually, this is a good segue into that is actually Jason's other favorite scene of the movie is the whole they don't think we're sophisticated and how that plays out.
Oh, yeah.
Really great scene. I think I want to cut it off there, I think, with our favorite scenes.
Can I just do one more?
Sure.
The scene where he's got that butler, the butler's wife, and I think the butler's wife made some kind of error on her tax returns or something. So they literally like execute her by firing squad in the backyard. And the butler's like, he screws something up. He's like, so he watches his wife get shot, and then he screws something up, and he's like, "Oh, I must not still be over my wife's death." Like,
Yeah.
it's so stupid.
I do want to say before we end this segment, I want to end with Steve Martin's actual favorite scenes and comment on some of those. His favorite scene itself is with Emmett Walsh shooting the cans at the gas station, and that is his personal favorite scene. His favorite moment of the film is and this is actually from his 2007 book Born Standing Up, if you want to check that out.
I've heard that's a good book.
Is the scene in which him and Bernadette Peters sing "Tonight You Belong to Me," which was actually performed by the two of them in the film.
Yeah. That scene is interesting because there's almost no real jokes in that scene.
No, it's just like
surprisingly like, I think this word gets bandied about too much, but it's surprisingly just wholesome.
Yeah.
You're just like, all right, like they're in love, I guess.
Yeah. The last bit that I wanted to mention here, and this is moving into our effects and filming, and that's where we're going to segue into this now with this, is that Steve Martin adapted several of his stand-up routine bits from his actual stand-up for this film, and one of the examples of that is actually the monologue at the beginning when he talks about growing up as a poor black child.
Right.
Which, if I had water in my mouth at that point in time, I would have spit that out at that point because
that was
it's just
flawless.
It's so unexpected for somebody to say that. And in addition, he also, when he leaves his rich mansion saying, I don't need anything, and then he goes, except for this and except for that, and the scene plays out over like 5 minutes of him like
picking up random stuff, like a chair, a thermos, an ashtray.
Yeah, that's actually part of his original stand-up routine. And Jason actually went back and looked into his stand-up routine, which you can find on YouTube. And it's called Let's Get Small, and that's where he adapted a lot of the stuff from that and put it in the film.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And it works.
The logic for that is that Steve Martin was really looking to break out of his stand-up comedy and really make that jump, that crossover to film. And so he had written this movie basing it off a lot of his routine. And even once he got greenlit for this, he got to choose the director, and he chose Carl Reiner, which was a fantastic choice in hindsight, obviously. They work very well together. The line from earlier, it wasn't always easy for me. I was born a poor black child, which is comedy gold.
That is price, especially in the movie when he says that, and then hard cut to a black family singing the blues at a Mississippi shack, and there he is, just with everybody.
Just assuming that he's one of the black children involved in the family. And
really.
Again, not played in a mean-spirited way, which is a really interesting and complicated relationship throughout the movie. And I want to talk about that in Legacy later, so I'm not going to spoil my thoughts on that now.
Okay.
The title, The Jerk, came out of a discussion that they had about what they should call the movie. They wanted it to be something short, but had the feeling of like an epic tale.
Right.
And the comparison is to the movie The Idiot. And so they wanted something the same vein as that.
I think that was a book, The Idiot.
Oh, okay.
By Dostoevsky.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a book.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
That's why I'm here.
A really interesting point from the making of this movie is that this was actually taking place during the gas shortage that happened in the 70s. So Steve Martin and Carl Reiner actually carpooled to set every day together. And so every day with them driving to set, they would actually talk about the movie and come up with jokes. And so they said that they added like 1 to 2 new jokes every single day while driving to set.
Wow. Good for them.
Yeah, really collaborative film that people had a lot of fun on. The dog, Shithead, and Steve Martin did not get off on the right foot. Steve Martin accidentally dropped his mittens on Shithead's face at one point between filming. And after that, the dog really disliked him and would often cower when he tried to pet it. And it really hated Steve Martin, and he felt really horrible about it.
There's something about, like, okay, if a person doesn't like you, that sucks, but, like, if a dog doesn't like you, that hurts.
It does
You know
hurt.
what I mean? Because they love everybody.
Yeah. The last effects and filming point that I want to make is something actually spectacular that I absolutely love about the movie history of this movie.
Okay.
Is that Carl Reiner decided to do a massive world premiere for this movie's trailer.
Okay.
So he did like the works, like big movie opening, like spotlights, limos, red carpet interviews, like the whole 9 yards, and didn't tell anybody that it was just for the trailer. Everybody thought they were going to see the full movie.
Oh my God.
So Steve Martin got up in front, thanked everyone for showing up, and then they played it 3 minutes of trailer and then ended it. And they didn't tell anybody. So they said that the trailer supposed to cost $110 for the budget, and it came $94 under budget for making it. And so basically, like, they just, like, straight after that, they closed the trailer or the theater and sent everybody home. And that marketing sent this movie, like, to the moon.
That's actually brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, just not only from a troll perspective, but that's really clever.
Yeah.
I'm into it.
I absolutely love it. I love the marketing behind that. Moving into score, the song Tonight You Belong to Me, which we mentioned earlier that Martin and Bernadette Peters sing together, was actually performed by them. It's a rendition of I believe, 60s song Pick a Bale of Cotton, the song that we open the film up with and end the film with. It's an old traditional American folk song. It actually is a real song.
Okay.
Somewhat controversial, I found out reading up online.
Oh, with a title like that, I can't imagine why.
Yeah, for being kind of racist and potentially glorifying slavery. It was written by black folk artists, so it comes from a place of...
It's a complicated legacy.
Yeah, like, I don't know, as a white dude, like, I don't know if I can say whether it was racist or not. Like, I don't know if that's up for me to decide.
That's very fair.
So, yeah, do with that information as you will. But it sang so fast and so lovingly that it's really hard to pick up that it's maybe got some really racist undertones.
It's such a joyful song that, like, you almost... For me, anyway, I almost didn't really listen to the lyrics.
Yeah.
Or I didn't think about them critically. I was just swept along with it.
And there's a lot of songs, even in the modern music industry, that if you actually listen to the lyrics, they're quite racially charged, or they're quite
gruesome.
like, like,
that's fair.
So, Legacy. This movie is cited as being one of the funniest movies of all time, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
Oh, absolutely.
Stanley Kubrick, one of my personal favorites, absolutely loved this movie and would often quote it on his sets, and was known for quoting this movie on his sets. And I quoted this today at work, and the person didn't get it. I said, so it's a profit deal.
You know,
And the person went, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Jeez.
I was wearing a mask, so they couldn't tell that I was laughing at myself.
Okay.
Also had a heavy influence on Jordan Peele's comedy, which is really cool. That's somebody who's very in the zeitgeist right now.
Interesting.
And like I said, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Jim Carrey was inspired by this role for his comedy. Comedy in general is kind of in a weird place right now, and I kind of want to talk about that with you.
Go on.
Like, we haven't really gotten any big budget comedies.
Not for a while. All right, here's a question. When was the last time you and I went to a theater to watch a comedy?
It has been literal years. Like,
Yeah.
I would have liked to have gone to see Jackass Forever, but that's a different type of comedy.
Yeah, that's like a docu-comedy.
Yeah.
You know what? The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is when The Other Guys came out in 2010. Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. You and I went to see it.
Yeah, that was maybe one of the last great comedies.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, like, we had a really rich era, and we were really lucky to kind of be up and coming in the era of...
Like the Judd Apatow era.
Yeah,
like
and
all that stuff.
And Adam McKay, that's the frequent collaborator with Will Ferrell. Like, where all of his movies came out of. And so we were really lucky to have those films. It also became, and I think this is also partially at fault with the internet, I think those movies created like a very tongue-in-cheek kind of humor on the internet, and a very self-referential...
A very, let's say a very 2000s edgy kind of humor.
Yeah, and now everything has to be like that. Like all Marvel movies have to have that kind of feel with them. And I think that's part of the reason why comedy's in a weird place. I think the other reason why, and this is maybe a question and a discussion that I want to have with you, is do you think this movie could be made today? Do you personally, not Steve Martin, do you think this movie could be made today?
No.
I agree.
No. And I mean, I just don't think anyone would be brave enough to do it.
And that is the exact thought that I had as well, is I actually, like you and I have talked about, we don't think this is a mean-spirited movie. I don't think the movie is inherently racist either, despite it maybe playing race up for jokes.
We're also two white guys. Maybe someone else from a different background would disagree with us.
Yeah.
But just from our narrow perspective, it seems pretty harmless.
Yeah, and
you're free to disagree with us.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd love to hear, like, if somebody does disagree with us and their points about why. But I think you're right. I don't think that this is a risk that Hollywood is willing to take in 2022. And I think that is also maybe why comedy just doesn't feel as relevant right now, is that Hollywood doesn't want to, but also can't take big risks with their movies because of the precarious position that theaters and the theater experience.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much. You're right. I don't know if it's so much cancel culture so much as it's just the situation Hollywood is in right now, right? They're making all these freaking Marvel movies just because they generate so much income.
Yeah.
Although even that seems to be starting to downslide a bit.
Yeah. I mean, it becomes quantity over quality as well, right? Like if you put out 10 Marvel movies that combined make $2 billion a year and cost you $500 million a year, it's the same as if you put out one Marvel movie that cost you $250 million a year and made up $1 billion, right? Like at the end of the day, it's the same amount of money. So if you can make more movies and take less risk while also making big budget movies like that, I say why not, right? And that's what I think Hollywood is doing is taking like big swings that really aren't actually swings because Marvel has just become such a bankable franchise and universe at this point at the movie theaters.
I can't really. I mean, you still get good movies being made, like Jordan Peele's Nope.
Yeah. Barbarian was fantastic.
Northman. Like good movies are still being made. It's just. But you're right, though.
They're not in the most obvious places anymore.
Yeah. Like, I feel like, actually, in terms of comedy, I feel like 90% of the comedy I've consumed throughout my lifetime has been from the internet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, most of the comedy content that I have the best relationship with has been from, like, smaller studios or independent creators just distributed online.
Well, and I think comedy as a movie is really hard to make feature length.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, I did really enjoy this movie, but I also feel like it could have maybe been just a little bit shorter.
Yeah, I think you could have cut 10 minutes out of this movie and had a really tight film.
But it also, like, if this movie had also been 5 or 10 minutes longer, I might have a less charitable interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Because I think with comedy, it's...
Judd Apatow movies are really bad for overstaying their welcome.
Are they?
Yes.
I've never...
This is 40.
Anchorman?
What's
That's not
Funny
a Judd
People?
Apatow. Okay, I've never
those
seen
kind of movies.
I've never seen those movies, so
yeah,
I'm gonna have to take your
those
word
movies
for
tend
it.
to overstay their welcome a little bit.
You know what Judd Apatow movie I watched recently that I actually really enjoyed?
What's that?
40-Year-Old Virgin.
Yes.
I thought that
Great
one
movie.
was actually like
classic.
a genuinely good movie.
It is a great movie.
Yeah.
Just I rewatched it recently as well, actually.
Yeah.
So I think to conclude, we both agree that this movie couldn't be made today, but that doesn't make it any less relevant and exciting to watch.
In a way, it almost, it's kind of a moot point because, like, it is very much a movie rooted in its time. Like, it has that zany Mel Brooks, Leslie Nielsen, Naked Gun kind of energy.
Yes.
It's very much a product of its time.
And that's okay. and it still makes us laugh in 2022.
I actually watched The Naked Gun for the first time last year with my parents, and that also... Actually, I can't believe I'm just thinking about this now, but, like, yeah, this almost... Like, I could almost see Leslie Nielsen... Well, I mean, no, I couldn't because it's a very different character, but, like, this feels like a very kind of... It's a very similar energy to those movies.
Yeah. Oh, I very much agree. Like, this movie is borderline a parody. It's just the movie that it's parodying came out, like, 15 years later as Forrest Gump.
This movie is so good, it's parodying something that doesn't exist yet. What a flex.
Yeah. And it's a movie that I might come back to sooner than I come back to Forrest Gump, actually, as well.
This is definitely a great date movie. Like, next date I go on, I think I'm going to try to show them this movie.
Cool. And I can guarantee you that they haven't seen it before either.
No one has.
No. And it really deserves to be watched.
Absolutely.
Sequels, prequels, and reboots really quickly. The movie actually does have a sequel called The Jerk 2, spelled like also.
Wait.
Yep.
I bet it sucks.
It's a TV movie, actually. It was executive produced by Steve Martin, but not written by him. And the rumor is that it was actually meant to be a pilot that didn't get approved for a full TV sitcom, but ended up being made into a TV movie.
So it sucks.
Probably, yes.
Okay.
There's some good TV movies out there. I'm not gonna knock all TV movies, but
When
as
you
far
say-
as it's almost like a direct to DVD kind of movie.
Yeah, like
right?
a kind of Disney Return of Jafar sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should watch it just for kicks.
Probably together so that we can rip on it, right?
Yeah.
That is a movie we watch together. Something that's
Definitely.
bad.
That'll be our next date night movie.
That sounds great. I'm in. So let's move into our personal reviews in the partner factor. I think that our audience knows at this point that you and I both really enjoyed this. I do want to speak to my review and Jess's review.
Okay.
Like, we both really like this. Like I said, I've been a fan of Steve Martin for a very long time. I've seen a lot of his films, and he's been a part of my life for almost the entirety of my life. Well,
Yeah.
not maybe a main character in my life, like someone like Chevy Chase has been, or Bill Murray. He's definitely been a supporting character.
He's up there.
Yeah, and like I said, I've really come to love and respect him over the last 10 years in particular, and I think I've watched just about everything he's released in the last 10 years and consumed a lot of it. So I've become a very big fan of Steve Martin over the last few years. And Jess also really enjoyed this film and had a lot of fun with it.
Nice.
Yeah, let's hear your review.
I think you probably know by this point, I had a really good time watching this movie. I did watch it alone, so no partner factor. But
Yep.
my neighbors probably heard me laughing. So
It's a very laugh out loud kind of movie.
yeah. So I definitely wouldn't mind showing this movie to other people just to,
This is a great movie to show somebody who doesn't necessarily love old movies and sit down and watch it with them together.
Yeah,
Because you guys are
absolutely.
really going to share some really great moments. And there are lines that I think I'm probably going to yell at you for the rest of our lives from this movie.
And I'm looking forward to it, genuinely. I'm trying to think, what do you think is the most quotable line in this movie? I got to think about this one.
Let's think about it, and I'm going to share Jason's review of the movie. He couldn't make it today for the episode,
Okay.
But did watch the movie. He said, overall, I really enjoyed the movie. Some really great gags and lines, even if they feel a little dated in a comedic sense. And I think that's just a sign of the movie being parodied and respected so much by comedians that it feels like something in some parts that you may have seen before, but like you said, it really subverts your expectations in a number of ways and at a number of times. However, he said the commitment of the people who went cockeyed was also really funny. And his transition into being kind of an idiot who's poor and then becoming rich and still an idiot. And then they don't know we're sophisticated scene was one of his favorites as well. And then he sent me all caps. Hey, he's not carnival personnel.
My favorite moment, the one that really got me was when he's on his first date with Bernadette, and he says, like, here, I have it pulled up here just so I can get it correct. He's like,
Yep.
now be totally honest, you have a boyfriend, don't you? And she says, kind of. And he says, I know this is our first date, but do you think next time you make love to your boyfriend, you can think of me? And she says, I haven't made love to him just yet. And he says, that's too bad. Do you think it's possible that someday you could make love to me and think of him? And she says, who knows? Maybe the two of you could make love and you could think of me. And he says, I'd be happy just to be included in there somewhere. That whole sequence was solid gold.
Absolutely. And honestly, my favorite scene is still Grandma Johnson reading the letter that Maven sent about his special purpose. And I can't wait to watch this movie and again miss parts of it because I'm laughing so hard.
Jesus. Also, I think maybe just in terms of sequences, it's when he's rich and that priest comes to him to ask him for money.
Yes.
And he shows him footage of a cat juggler. And it's very,
it's
very
so
clearly
obviously
Steve Martin with like dyed black hair just juggling cats. So stupid.
It's beautiful.
It's so
It
stupid.
was beautiful. And what a beautiful movie. What a genuine, beautiful movie. And I think that's it for our review. It was a lot of fun. It's actually a pretty short episode because it's hard to talk about a comedy movie because you draw the line about just rehashing all of the great moments while also like respecting the fact that there's no way you and I could do them justice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we leave it there. Thank you all so much for sharing this movie with us, and I hope to share this movie with other people. Up and coming, the end of the year, we're into December. Our next movie is going to be our holiday movie. If you have any recommendations for great classic holiday movies, let us know in the comments. And we're going to end the year with a reflection of our favorite movies and favorite performances that we saw this year. And we still have yet to work out the details of what that looks like. But I am really excited about it because I do have some really great movies that I can't wait to talk about. And they're movies that we haven't necessarily talked about on this podcast yet.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I think that's it. Thanks for joining. And
you know what? Blake and I are going to sign off and go enjoy a nice hot cup of pizza.
Yeah. You mean I'm going to stay this color? St. Louis? No, Nathan Johnson.
Oh, man.
What's really great, sorry, I'm talking about this before we end it.
Okay.
What's really great about that line is because SpongeBob SquarePants makes very great use of that line later. And so as a child, I had always been one of my favorite SpongeBob lines ever is, "Hey, is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick. Hello, is this the Krusty Krab? No, this is Patrick." And that is definitely inspired by this movie.
It's definitely in the same vein, that's for sure.
Yeah, and so the fact that this movie was the originator of that, and that was actually ad-libbed by Martin in that moment.
I could see it.
All right, we'll end there. Thanks for listening, everyone. I really hope you enjoy this movie.
Bye.